The alarm cut through the station like a blade. Red light spilled across the observation deck, and every alien student froze mid-breath. On the giant screen above them, a live feed from a human colony was shaking violently, dust falling from a cracked ceiling, and a man was trapped beneath a fallen support beam, his leg pinned, his face pale with pain. Beside him, a small dog was barking without pause, pulling at the beam with its teeth, refusing to stop even as its gums bled. Grace, a young researcher from the Institute of Comparative Sapience, gripped the edge of her seat. She was not human. Her skin shimmered faintly blue under the emergency lighting, and her 3 eyes were locked on the screen, wide with disbelief. "Why does it not run?" she whispered. "The structure is failing. Any rational creature would leave." Her professor, an elder named Kessa, did not answer right away. She simply let the feed play. The man on screen, whose name tag on his uniform read Daniel, tried to push the dog away with a shaking hand. "Go," he said, coughing through dust. "Go, find help. Go now." The dog did not go. It barked louder, then began digging at the rubble beside his leg, its paws tearing until they bled. The room of alien students sat in complete silence. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The tension in the room mirrored the tension on the screen, and for the first time, none of them were thinking like scientists. They were thinking like witnesses. A rescue team broke through the debris 4 minutes later. The dog had refused to leave Daniel's side the entire time, even as smoke thickened around them, even as the ceiling groaned above their heads, ready to collapse again. When the medics lifted Daniel onto a stretcher, the dog leapt up beside him and would not be pulled away. Kessa finally spoke, her voice calm but heavy with meaning. "This is not an isolated event. This is the pattern." Grace turned to her, still shaken. "The pattern of what?" "Of loyalty that asks for nothing in return," Kessa said. "Watch again. Not the human this time. Watch the animal." She replayed the footage, slower now. The dog's ears were flat with fear. Its body trembled. It was clearly terrified, and yet fear never once moved it away from the person it loved. That single detail struck the room harder than the danger itself. A student named Peter, seated near the front, leaned forward. He was Crithian, a species known for calculating every action based on survival odds. "This defies our models," he said. "An animal without language, without complex reasoning, choosing to face death rather than abandon its human. There must be some hidden reward we are missing." "There is no hidden reward," Kessa said. "That is what makes it remarkable. Humans have documented similar behavior thousands of times, across all of their settled worlds. Animals bonded to humans consistently choose protection over self-preservation, comfort over safety, presence over survival." She pulled up another file, this one older, grainy with age. A snowstorm on a remote human research base. A woman named Laura was lost outside during a blizzard, her radio destroyed by frost. Her dog, a large animal built for cold climates, found her 3 hours later, half buried in snow. Instead of returning to base for help, it laid its entire body over her, sharing every ounce of warmth it had. Rescue teams found them at dawn. Laura survived. The dog had frostbite so severe it lost part of one paw, but it never once let go of its post beside her. "It could have gone back," Peter said quietly. "It was trained to know the way back. The data says animals with this level of training almost always seek help first." "And yet," Kessa said, "it stayed. Because in that moment, staying mattered more than any command it had ever learned." The room grew quieter, if that was even possible. Grace noticed something shifting in her own thoughts, a discomfort she couldn't quite name. It was the realization that everything she believed about instinct, about self-preservation, about the basic rules of survival, was being challenged by a creature far simpler than her own species. Kessa continued, her tone growing sharper, more urgent. "Now watch this next one carefully. This is not from a rescue. This is from a battlefield evacuation. The screen changed again. Chaos. Smoke. Human soldiers moving quickly through a damaged outpost, shouting coordinates, pulling wounded comrades toward waiting transports. Amid the noise, a small dog darted between legs and debris, barking at a doorway that had already been marked as cleared. A soldier named Oliver hesitated. "That's a false alarm," someone shouted. "Move, we don't have time." But Oliver knelt down anyway, trusting the animal's frantic behavior over the initial scan. Behind that doorway, a child had been trapped under a collapsed shelf, unseen by the earlier sweep. Oliver pulled the child free seconds before the ceiling gave way entirely. The dog did not receive a medal. It did not receive praise beyond a scratch behind the ears and a whispered thank you. It simply sat beside the rescued child, tail wagging cautiously, checking on them as if making sure they were truly safe. "This animal risked everything," Kessa said, "for a stranger, not its own human, not someone it had a direct bond with. A child it likely had never met before that mission." Grace shook her head slowly. "That contradicts everything we assumed about bonded loyalty being exclusive to one handler." "Correct," Kessa said, "because the loyalty we are studying is not just about one person. It reflects something deeper in the humans themselves, something they have passed on to the creatures they raise. Compassion without condition, courage without guarantee of safety. These are not accidents of behavior. These are values, transferred through care, through years of trust, through relationships built without contracts or agreements." Peter, still visibly unsettled, asked the question that had clearly been building in his mind since the start of the lesson. If this is what an animal does for them, an animal with no true understanding of duty or honor, what happens when a human commits fully to another sapient being? What happens when they commit to us? Kessa allowed a long pause before answering, letting the weight of the question settle over the room. "That," she said, "is the question every species who has ever tried to fight them should have asked, before making that mistake. And it is the exact reason every species who has stood beside them has never once regretted it." She brought up a final piece of footage, this one recent, taken from a joint colony where humans and several alien species lived and worked together. A fire had broken out in a shared habitat dome, spreading fast through ventilation shafts. Panic spread just as quickly. In the middle of the chaos, a small human girl named Ellen ran back into the smoke-filled corridor, ignoring the shouts of adults behind her. She was not going after a person. She was going after a small alien creature, a young Vondrian pup that had been left behind in the panic, too small and too frightened to move on its own. Ellen wrapped the creature in her jacket and stumbled back through the smoke, coughing violently, her eyes streaming, until two firefighters pulled her the rest of the way out. She refused medical treatment until she confirmed the creature was breathing safely in someone's arms. The room sat in complete stillness once more. She had never met that creature before that day, Kessa said softly. She owed it nothing. It belonged to another family entirely, one she barely knew, and still, without hesitation, she ran toward danger to save it. Grace's voice was barely above a whisper. Why would she do that? Because to humans, Kessa said, loyalty is not a resource to be measured and rationed carefully. It is instinct, it is choice, freely given, again and again, regardless of species, regardless of risk, regardless of reward. The lesson ended not with applause, not with debate, but with a heavy silence that lingered long after the screen went dark. Every student in that room understood, perhaps for the first time, that they had been studying humanity incorrectly from the very beginning. They had been searching for patterns of logic, calculations of benefit, models of self-interest. But humanity could never be fully understood through numbers alone. It had to be understood through the quiet dog that refused to leave an injured man's side, through the frost-bitten paw pressed against a freezing woman's back, through a soldier who trusted an animal's instinct over a machine's scan, through a young girl who ran into fire for a creature that was not even her own. Grace stood after class, staring at the now empty screen for a long moment. Peter walked up beside her, his usual calculating expression replaced by something quieter, something closer to respect. "I used to think loyalty was a strategy," he said, "a tool species used to strengthen their own survival chances." Grace nodded slowly. "And now?" Peter looked at the dark screen, at the last frozen image of the child's rescued pup wrapped safely in a stranger's arms. "Now I think it might be the very thing that makes them impossible to defeat," he said. "Not their weapons, not their ships. This." Grace said nothing more. She simply turned and walked out of the room, carrying with her a new understanding of a species she once believed she had already measured completely. She had been wrong, and somewhere far beyond that station, on a world spinning quietly beneath a familiar sun, a man named Daniel sat recovering in a hospital bed. A small dog curled protectively beside his legs, refusing, even now, to leave his side.